Alright good people, we have tested them all. The $599 MacBook Neo, which will be the nightmare of every other budget-oriented laptop within this price range, the all-new M5 powered MacBook Airs, which are so good that they easily define a whole product category of passively cooled lifestyle notebooks, and the MacBook Pros in both 14 and 16 inch being powered by the M5 Pro, which is easily one of the best all-round SOCs you can find right now, and the M5 Max, which is once more just pure witchcraft at this point. So how about you sit back, relax, and let me give you a bit of a general overview for Apple's 2026 laptop lineup, and then all of our detailed performance results mixed in with our recommendations for what you should actually invest in or where you should rather save your money. Let's get into it. As per usual, let's kick things off with our review configs. And since we just did a detailed standalone review for the all-new MacBook Neo, I would ask you to check out that video should you be interested in Apple's most affordable laptop. And we will start right away with the MacBook Air 13 and 15. In a chassis that is once again 100% identical to prior generations, pretty much the only upgrade you are getting is the new M5, which we have already benchmarked extensively last year in the entry-level MacBook Pro. And it will be very interesting how the slim chassis without a fan is able to handle the new silicon. In the sleek 13-inch full aluminum case, the next step up after the Neo bets on the 10-core M5, alongside 16 gigs of RAM and a 512GB SSD. As per usual, you have to make do with a 60Hz IPS display, with a roughly QHD resolution and a glossy glass cover. And while it is a solid enough panel, it's not very exciting, especially in 2026, where 1000 nits OLEDs are becoming the standard in some competing devices. The 15-incher is not doing much better, and while the Air's display should still suffice for most people, if you're looking for some eye candy for your movie watching experience, you might have to look elsewhere. Our config of the bigger sibling bets on the higher-end M5 with 2 additional GPU cores, double the RAM and 4 times the storage, which asks for quite a significant additional sum, but what else is new in 2026, right? Both models share their port layout though, and with a pair of Thunderbolt 4s, a MagSafe power connector and a headphone jack, it's quite flexible, but if you're not utilizing a dock or Apple's own studio display though, you will find yourself running out of connection options rather quickly. New for this generation is Wi-Fi 7 with once again solid, if not really class-leading wireless transfer rates, and similarly the webcams get the job done without really offering a lot to write home about. For all MacBooks right here in front of me, you get the same usual haptic touchpad experience, which is still amongst the best in the industry. And while I personally do not really like the keyboards, since I prefer a bit more travel, I can still type away quickly without a lot of mistakes. And you do get some decent feedback and a precise overall feel. For the MacBook Pro, we tested the maxed out 14-incher, so that means the M5 Max with the 40-core GPU upgrade, 128 gigs of unified memory and 8 TB of insanely fast NVMe storage, and it's probably one of the most expensive laptops we ever had in the studio. For both our 14 and 16-inch models, we had the pleasure of feasting our eyes on the matte option for the mini LED panels. And similarly to the MacBook Airs, there's nothing new on the display side of things, and you still get some very solid SDR brightness, eye-searing HDR results, and overall a still quite premium display experience, even though something like the ProArt P16s or Yoga Pro 9s tandem OLEDs easily take the cake here in my opinion. Externally, the Pros also do not sport anything new, and you get your HDMI 2.1, 3 Thunderbolt 5s and a full-size SD card reader in the usual high-quality feeling chassis, which does look and feel as premium as when it first launched a few years ago. But again, I can't help myself, but it's starting to feel a bit stale. But let me know what you think. Do we need chassis upgrades for these? Sound off below. And before I forget, for the 16-incher we actually had 2 models to test, a higher-end M5 Max config and a 64GB 4TB M5 Pro variant, which I've used a bit more in depth as my daily driver, and we will also be able to keep this one for a bit longer. So I'm very much looking forward to a long-term test, especially especially for our content creation needs. So please make sure to subscribe so you do not miss that video if you want a perspective from a die-hard Windows laptop fanboy. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's talk performance. As per usual, I only selected a few key benchmarks to give you an overview and to enable you to compare the MacBooks to each other and a few competitors. As always, we have detailed reviews for each model and config on the website, so please check them out if you are after additional data. Kicking things off with Cinebench and Geekbench for the CPU part, and well, what Apple is able to squeeze out of 18 cores running at a little over 70 watts peak and about 60 watts sustained is pretty crazy, and both the M5 Pro and Max, which use the same CPU part, are the fastest mobile chips you can find right now. As per usual for Apple, performance stays the same no matter if you're plugged in or not. Just make sure to select the high power mode to reproduce our settings. And speaking of reproducing our results, it seems like the 14-incher is not quite able to rein in the powerful new silicon, and we had to deal with some pretty drastic variations between runs with quite the performance delta. If this is a software thing, something related to power delivery, or simply physics, we do not know, but we will update you guys as soon as we know more. The M5 in the Airs is also keeping pace with the equivalent Intel and AMD competition, which is again quite impressive considering we are talking about passively cooled systems here. Of course, performance figures will drop after sustained heavy usage, but it's definitely not as much as you might think. Again, for additional details, more benchmarks and things like the MacBook stress test behavior, please head over to our website. Crossmark, which we use for measuring system performance when looking at x86 machines, Windows on ARM PCs and macOS devices, either seems to favor Apple here quite a bit, or the new MacBooks are simply that good. And judging from our very own subjective everyday experience, it might very well be the latter, since from the Neo all the way up to the big boys, your overall general computing experience is pretty much flawless and incredibly snappy. On the GPU side, Nvidia's mobile high-end cards, the 5080 and 5090, still reign supreme, but the M5 Max with its 40 GPU cores does get within spitting distance, at least in our synthetics, while the M5 Pro is roughly on par with Strix Halo, while the MacBook Airs have to yield to Intel's fastest Panther Lake variants and are also either behind or on par with Qualcomm's X2 Elite, depending on the benchmarks. We also did some creator test runs for some of our review configs and some of the competitors we had access to, and overall you will have a tough time to find better optimized machines for Photoshop than the M5 Pro or M5 Max MacBook Pros. And even in something GPU heavy like Premiere or even more so Resolve, the lead of the 5090 in the ProArt P16 for example is getting smaller and smaller. What will be better suited for your individual use case will vary depending on your workflow, what kind of footage you are working with, and how advanced or effects-heavy your timelines are, for example. And please keep in mind that Adobe, Blackmagic and Puget update their apps and benchmarks a lot. So please just use our numbers here as a rough comparison, since if you either use older numbers or test on your system in the future, things might look very, very different. Macs aren't gaming machines. While this is still somewhat true, that's mostly the case because of the limited number of titles being available natively, or the requirement of third-party software to emulate PC versions of your favorite games, since especially the M5 Pro and the M5 Max are surprisingly capable, while you will of course have to manage your expectations what the passively cooled M5 Airs can do. But even so, if you can find native games like No Man's Sky for example, you can easily enjoy a completely silent and pretty smooth gaming experience. And for the higher end chips, well, with more support from developers and more titles being available natively on launch, Apple could easily enable a big chunk of the market as a completely new target audience, so let's see what will happen here in the future. Fan noise is mostly a non-issue even for the higher-end configs of the MacBook Pro, even though especially the 14-incher can get unusually audible for an Apple laptop, especially in the high power mode and when stressing the system with synthetic load. But as always, please enjoy our more subjective noise samples and a few speaker comparisons. battery life in our standardized tests is quite impressive. But again, what else is new? At maximum display brightness though, especially the MacBook Pros need to be recharged a lot quicker than their sleeker Air counterparts because of the much brighter mini LED displays. As per usual, these tests can differ drastically from your real-world experience, and from my time with the M5 Pro 16-incher, I must admit that especially when you're doing something more advanced, the MacBooks really shine with simply impressive endurance away from the wall. I'm not used to see from laptops that I usually use for our videos. Just as one example, I was editing one of our latest videos on a train commute the other day and started with an almost full battery and was editing between 1.5 and 2 hours in Resolve and still had 71% left, while you usually get through a full charge on a similarly capable Windows machine in the same time. And in general, the 16-incher, especially with its higher RAM config, would be a great fit as a workstation for my workflows. And I must grudgingly admit that I really liked the experience, except the usual things you have to get used to when switching the underlying operating system. I would still prefer something like the P16 for the overall capabilities of the system as a whole, especially if you consider gaming as well, which I do a lot. But I would sure miss the whole battery life experience. I will be able to test this one a bit more, as I mentioned already, so if there's anything you would like to know or considering making the switch yourself, let me know below so I know what to look out for. Alrighty, good people, that should be it for today. Once again, you could say Apple did the bare minimum when upgrading their entire stack of laptops. And while we still have to make do with the same chassis, ports and displays across the board, I guess everything is still good enough to be relevant, even though I'd say they are missing a true headline or standout feature. Sure, all laptops feel incredibly premium and are very well made, but I would argue the Windows side has caught up, and simply making a good chassis might not be enough in the years to come. Under the hood, it's a completely different story though, and what you're able to get out of the M5, be it for the regular variants in the MacBook Air 13 and 15 for a smooth and silent everyday computing experience, or even more so for the M5 Pro and M5 Max for everyone that wants more, paired with an insane amount of RAM should you need it, well, Apple's silicon sure is damn impressive. But let me know which one would be your pick and why, or if you, like me, rather shop around on the Windows side of the fence. Sound off in the comments below. Please leave a like and sub on your way out. Thanks a ton for watching. My name is Alex and I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.